we are technically already in a third world war. Simply because we have three distinct nations fighting on the ground with their governments backing them. And they come from, obviously, different segments of the planet. If you look at it in the logistical sense, we were in a third world war the second Russia decided to come over that border, because immediately NATO and all of its allies decided to throw their backing and were shoving weapons and equipment in here. Then yes, we are, by that standard, 100%, we're in a third world war.
Hello, today on Army TV we have the opportunity to talk with John, a soldier of the International Legion of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. Welcome to the program.
Hello, how are you doing?
John, I'm very glad to see you. It's quite unusual for me to speak with you, first as an experienced fighter and second as a native speaker. So this also brings a great deal of responsibility. The last time I spoke with American fighters, it was with instructors who were teaching us, but those were fairly simple instructions and simple discussions. However, today we will dive deeper into these topics, and you will be assisted by the interpreter, who you will also hear in your earpiece. I hope this won't cause any inconvenience. And the first question I'd like to ask you is about the International Legion. Could you please tell us more about who is fighting there and what tasks you are carrying out?
So the types of people that we have in the Legion are numerous. In some cases, too numerous for me to just point out. I will say that we have representatives from virtually every continent in the world here, which just goes to show you how many people are in support of Ukraine against Russia. But pretty much every one of them, I consider all brothers and sisters in arms. They're all just as dedicated and motivated to defend this country and fight for its freedom as every other Ukrainian next to us. As far as our mission, my particular unit, we're what we call a force multiplier. We don't own any one AO, we go to where we are needed. So we go show up on a front line somewhere, we talk with the friendly brigades or battalions out there, and then we tell them, this is what we can do, what do you need us to do? And then we go out and stick it to the Russians.
Also, I'd like to ask about your personal military background. What kind of combat experience did you have before joining the International Legion? What motivated you to make this decision? How did you come to this point, and how did you learn about the opportunity to join?
So, brief background, I'm U.S. Marines, served in the U.S. Marine Corps for 6 years, so I did 2 combat deployments in Iraq. So this type of lifestyle is very familiar to me. When the invasion, the full invasion first kicked off, like many of my fellow veterans, we were watching the news very carefully. And we all saw it, and a lot of the other nation intelligence agencies were saying it was going to happen. And then it did. And then about a week and a half after the invasion, I saw President Zelensky pop up on the TV screen and say, we need help from any foreigners who are willing to come over here. These are the skill sets that we need. And I looked at that list and I go, the Marine Corps taught me how to do all of those things. I know what I need to do. So I'm kind of a guy who always needs to do something that is productive, that is meaningful. And when I saw Zelensky up there, when I saw the full invasion kicked off, I said, you know what? The civilian job can shove it. I'm going to go and do what I was trained to do what I was born to do, and try and help those who can't help themselves. And so here I am, 2.5 years later, and I would not change that choice ever.
First of all, thank you so much for your decision. I would also like you to share a bit about your experience, your first experience coming to Ukraine. Had you ever been to Ukraine before? The war here is perhaps different from the war in Iraq. How different was your first combat encounter during the full-scale war in Ukraine from everything that had happened before? To what extent did your experience help you or hinder you? Did you feel like you were fully prepared for this, or did it feel like a completely different kind of war? What was going through your mind? Share your impressions of Ukraine and your first battles.
So my first experience in combat here, I should say, one, vastly different from my experiences in Iraq. In Iraq, we're fighting an insurgency. Essentially it's guerrilla warfare that we're trying to fight against. Here, it's two stand-up armies fighting against each other, clearly uniformed. So I know who my enemy is and where they're at. But my first experience was actually in around Kherson. It was during the build-up, the starting of that operation to liberate Kherson. And so our task was to gain a foothold in one of the small village just across this small river. And the U.S. Marines are touted as being an amphibious assault team, or an amphibious assault military, and I've never done an amphibious assault. I fought in the desert. I suddenly come over to Ukraine, and I'm getting thrown into a Zodiac and told to go do an amphibious assault on a small village, and I'm like, cool. So we went up there. We did the best we could. We actually got pinned down by a lot of our Russian artillery at the time because that was when they had more shells than citizens. And so for about 12 hours, we were being shelled. And that was my first time ever being shelled by artillery. I took many naps that day while I'm sitting in the basement waiting to move. And then we ended up having to swim out because the boats that we were using got popped. And so we threw our kit inside of a Zodiac that was half inflated, and we got in the water and we dredged about 1.5 kilometers back up river, and then hiked out for another 1 or 2 kilometers before we got picked up. But that was my first experience, my first introduction to the war, and possibly one of the coolest things I've ever done, prospectively, because it just kind of felt like an action movie or playing like SOCOM or something like that, just sticking my head out with NVGs on, swimming through the night. But that operation actually ended up producing a lot of fruit. Although we got shelled, we actually scared the Russians, and the forces they had forced them to go into this one building, which later that afternoon was struck by a HIMARS, which they had just shown up maybe a month and a half prior to that. And so they struck the building with a HIMARS attack. And the estimate is I think it was somewhere between 50 and 150 guys were inside that building, they say. So good kill count for the HIMARS right there. Our presence there forced them into that into that barrel, essentially. And it was a launching point for, Ukrainian forces and brigades to continue the assault down to Kherson. And you can look at the results after that. We have Kherson now. So we were able to liberate that and many other villages along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, operations like this, you cannot operate by yourself. You interact with other units, other brigades, don't you? I mean, that you are not fighting alone. What can you say about other people who were with you side by side, about Ukrainian
No.
units that were together with you? Maybe you can single out some of the units, some of the brigades, and what are your impressions about interaction with Ukrainian military forces?
So, no, we, like I said, we're a force multiplier. We can't do our jobs without help from our friendly forces in the area, right? We don't have artillery, we don't have armor. So we rely on our friendly forces to help us do that. And we just wouldn't be able to operate at all, it would be a hell of a lot more risky. By and large, the experience has been a pleasant one. It has been a very supportive one. Just operating in Bakhmut alone was one of those deals where it's just like, I can't defend this position. I can't assault that building unless I know that, these guys over here are holding their ground or are, hitting this target with their drones or their artillery pieces. We've actually, in a few cases, I mean, they've risked their lives to come out and pick us up too in some really shady and sketchy places. I remember one time in Bakhmut, I want to say it was the 95th Brigade, I want to say it was, in Bakhmut there at the time. They sent out an M113 out to come pick us up while we were being chased by artillery. So, the drivers out there have some really, really stiff spines, they got, but yeah, I would not be here today, had it not been for the actions and support from our friendly Ukrainian forces. And they're just, and by and large, they are some of the most welcoming individuals, they're happy to see us, we're happy to see them. They share, I'll get into a trench with one of them and they'll be like, do you want some coffee? Do you want some tea? Here's some food, here's some crackers. And I'm just like, dude, I'm here for like a day or two. You're out here for a week or more. Like, I'm not going to take any of your food, but thanks.
I'd like to ask about the language barrier. So you have mentioned about Bakhmut. They were urban fights, fights in the city. So sometimes the language is the identification factor. Like if you hear the Russian language, you are shooting the air, because language is an identification. What about the language barrier? Did you try to learn some Ukrainian words? Or how were you getting along with the driver of that M113? Quite possible that he was a newly drafted tractor driver, and suddenly he was there with you. So, did you have communication problems?
Communication has been, it's always going to be a challenge. Thankfully, within our units, we generally have at least one or two Ukrainian or Russian-speaking individuals with us, so that eases a lot of the pains and tensions. But a lot of times in the moment, the language that we all speak is kind of the same because we're all there fighting. We're all soldiers, and if I'm hollering at you to go left, and you don't know what left is because left is liva in Ukrainian, it's just like, if I'm hollering at you and I'm doing one of these, you understand what's going on, right? I've had a couple of Ukrainians on my team that didn't speak any English, but through our drills that we were doing, through some of the training that we were doing, we were able to do the exercise with virtually no hiccups whatsoever. I'm screaming angry American, just, telling you to do something. They look at me and go, oh, okay. And they go and do exactly what I need to because they understand the situation that we're in. They understand the context of what I'm actually trying to say, and vice versa. You know, if I'm, you know, somebody's, you know, hollering at me for something, I'll look at them and I'll think about the situation that we're in. I'll go, oh, he wants me to face that way and shoot those guys. Got it. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's the language is on the battlefield itself, not generally an issue. It's when you start getting into the, you know, finer things like I'm trying to talk on the radio or, you know, I'm just trying to order some food. That's when the problem.
I'd like to ask you about the food. You have mentioned the people offering you the coffee. I remember the time when I was at the front line, and I also remember well that the US MREs were really good. I assume that you are also familiar with Ukrainian MREs. For example, I know that burrito in your MREs is really tasty. Can you rate Ukrainian MREs and maybe give a few comments? Our local MREs are quite ordinary for us, but maybe for you they are a bit different. For example, the US MREs with the burrito is something unique and special. What about you? What do you think, for example, about meat with beans from Ukrainian MREs?
The various rations that we've had. So I've actually, obviously in the U.S. Marines, I only had the U.S. MREs, which, other than the veggie omelet, are all pretty good. But I've experienced both Ukrainian, we've had French, I want to say we've had some German. It was German or Swedish, one of those two. But the various different militaries from around the world have given us some stuff. But I will say that the biggest changing one was definitely the Ukrainian one, because I remember when we first got here, it was the dried, dehydrated stuff that you had to like somehow get a boiling pot of water to dump in there to make, which, if I remember correctly at the time, they didn't actually give you anything to boil the water with, so you had to figure it out yourself. But now it's the Ukrainian MREs are kind of similar to like the U.S. ones, where they're already, you know, they're ready to eat out of the packet. You can eat it cold if you want. And I believe they also have a French-styled heating system as well, where it's got a little stand and something to boil the water with and all that. So, and they're actually pretty good. By and large, they're actually pretty good. So now it's just, I see that green packet and I'm just like, yeah, I'll take that one instead of that, whatever that French one is, because it's got tins and sardines or something in it.
Okay.
Скажи, будь ласка, такий момент.
Now that you are fighting in Ukraine, I'm sure that there are a lot of your buddies in the USA. I suppose they ask you about your experience here now. Is Ukraine being discussed a lot in the military community in the USA? Also among the veterans who didn't join the Ukrainian International Legion. Are they interested in what is going on here? How often do they ask you, like, hey, tell what's up there?
So it is split, like you said, right? You know, within the military community, Ukraine is pretty prominent in their news feeds or their information gathering. The veterans are interested to see, you know, guys like me who they may have served with, see how they're doing, see what they're doing. You know, they're interested in what kind of kit they're using and everything, right? Within the military complexes themselves, so like the Department of Defense back home, Pentagon, they're obviously, one, they're invested anyway with supporting Ukraine, but they're also invested in learning all the tactics, the do's and the don'ts, the things that do and don't work. So on that note, yes, within the military sphere, veterans and active, it's pretty high up. Within the civilian sector, other than friends and family asking me how I'm doing, they have either no desire or they don't have the stomach to really ask me about any of the things that are going on the front line or anywhere in between. The civilian media outlets have, by and large, stopped reporting. From what I'm told, have stopped reporting on the war itself, outside of big events, right? Such as the recent use of the new ICBM or the ICBR or whatever the hell it's called, that Russia launched on Dnipro. So, like, outside of that, civilians don't hear or see anything other than, misinformation, which is a huge problem. Obviously, it's it's not just in the U.S. either that's a problem. But I get so many people, friends on like Facebook or wherever, that are complaining about something that they know absolutely nothing about, such as the financial support that we get, right? Hey, freaking, we've sent over $50 billion or $60 billion of money over there. No, it's $60 billion of equipment and material, most of which is just that, equipment and material, stuff that the U.S. is going to throw away and destroy anyway. That's money that the Pentagon was going to use on various projects themselves. The U.S. population, we're never going to see that. So there's a lot of misinformation going around that I wish I could do something about, and on a larger platform than just simply a one-on-one. Hey, stop being stupid. This is actually how it is. It's not this way. But I'm just me. So so hopefully somebody with a bigger bank account and or political seat can hopefully wake everybody up and point them in the right direction. But yeah, I think they definitely do need to pay more attention to what is going on over here, because even though it's currently affecting my home country in a very small way, and it is affecting them, but it's a very small way. If this goes wrong here, it could end up affecting them in a very big way. So hopefully they can educate themselves, I think, sooner rather than later.
We are talking now, and for me it's very interesting to talk to the former representative of the army of another country. When you come back home, do you feel the same interest to you? Like, oh, this is the veteran who just returned from Ukraine, who fought there. It would be interesting to invite him to the podcast or to record an interview, because he has a unique experience. When you are back home to the USA, do you have many phone calls with such invitations?
So I've never actually been invited to do any kind of interviews like that. I think it's one reason, I think, is just because I'm not predominantly known over there. I think another part of it is, like I said, within the civilian world, not a lot of people are interested, so there's not a big push to, hey, this guy just came back from Ukraine, let's interview him and post him up on CNN or Fox News or wherever. There's just not a lot of drive for that. So no, I haven't been approached by anybody. I've only recently started doing interviews like this here in Ukraine, so maybe down the road they might start showing a little more interest, and if they do, I will gladly talk to them and tell them what's what, try and correct some of their thinking or their narrative, but yeah, no, I haven't received anything like that. Also, it probably helps that, or it doesn't help that I've only been home one time since I've been here, and that was for 2 weeks for a friend's wedding.
Тоді виходить
Yeah,
більше, що
most
я
probably this is because I also watch military content if we are talking about the USA, not following the civil life of US citizens. But in the military field, I suppose that you saw some of your bloggers that make the reviews of the combat actions at the front line. I know that there is a blogger, a Navy guy, who contacted the 3rd Assault Brigade, and they organized such kind of podcast and discussed quite a lot. I am pleased that in the past we were watching the videos of really cool guys from the USA, the Black Hawk Down movie, some others as well. And we used some of these things to learn from you. And now it's pleasant for us to see that Americans are watching our videos.
дуже тішить.
I'd like to ask you how the war is changing. You have been here for quite a while. Can you see how the war is changing? If we compare what was at the beginning, a lot of artillery and aviation, and what is happening now. Personally, when I joined the army, I came to the artillery unit and I thought that, okay, this is what the war looks like. It was my perception for the war at that time. But right now, my perception started to change because of FPV drones. I'd like to ask you one question. For me, maybe it was easier at the beginning of the war because I had no war experience before the beginning of the full-scale invasion. I was an ordinary civilian, and when I joined the army, I saw the domination of Russian artillery and aviation, and I instantly had this perception of the war. As for you, I assume that you were used to a different kind of war. So you had to adapt, and now we all have to readapt because of the huge technological changes, all that FPV drones, strike drones, etc. Now, when I go to the front line to shoot a story, I can only make a video of an infantryman in the trenches. It is even difficult to get out of the trenches because the enemy drones are almost instantly ready to hit you. Can you tell about this change from your point of view, the change of the perception?
So I had a similar mindset, right? It's, all right, cool. I'm going to go into this particular war and it's going to be me sitting in a trench somewhere, which for me in particular, it wasn't. But I think the biggest, and I know I hate bringing it up because it's kind of tired and used too many times, but drones, obviously. They have been the biggest change. And it's something that I've seen, like yourself, evolve from a single DJI Maverick Pro sitting in the air, freaking, a click away, just zoomed in and they're just correcting artillery to now we have FPVs, bomber drones, and we have a flamethrower drone now, which is terrifying. Yeah, this the biggest change because we have changed our own reactions to those threats from, we just changed I don't want to give that out actually, but we have changed how we react and counteract that drone threat. Now we also have ground drones that have guns mounted on them, or they're suicide ground drones that have a TM62 mine inside of it, and they're just ready to roll in and dump into a blindage somewhere. So that is obviously the biggest change, because when I was in the Marines, drones for us was a small fixed wing drone. We throw it up in the air and it just looks and takes some pictures, comes back, and we look through the pictures, and that's about it. So yeah, the drones have been the biggest change for me. But coming from the Iraq War, obviously the introduction of actual barrel artillery and air power. That was the other thing I didn't have to deal with in Iraq was, oh, that's a Ka-52. Got it. I should probably go inside now, right? Seeing enemy MiGs flying through the skies of Bakhmut, that was kind of terrifying. Thankfully, they weren't aiming at me, but still they were well within eye shot. Like I could see inside the cockpit as they banked away and popped their flares. So close enough for me to, nope. So yeah, it's vastly different than anything that the Americans have had to deal with in a very long time.
You have mentioned earlier that in Iraq you used drones. As far as I understand, there is one more significant difference between these wars. Did you use some kind of special tactical military drones, like Black Hornet, the tiny one, or was it Autel, DJI, anything of this kind?
So the drones we were using were like, I would call them mid-sized drones. You could throw them in the back of a Humvee. It was the Dragon Eye and the Raven systems. They're fixed wing, propeller driven, hand launched, and they're just simply observation drones. They have a fairly decent range, fairly decent altitude that they can climb up to, but they're largely pre-programmed flight patterns. So I have to load up a map, and then I draw on the map what I want them to do for how long, and then bring them back. The fact that it was nothing like today where I can literally take a hobbyist drone pilot and say, all right, cool, here's a helmet, here's a rifle, you're gonna sit on that line and tell me where the Russians are so that we can drop bombs on top of them. Anything bigger than that, it was the Air Force's job, with the Reapers and Predator drones and everything, which would be really cool to have at this moment, personally. But yeah, that was we didn't really have a specialist on that. It was literally, I was in an infantry platoon, and they were just like, you want to know how to fly drones a little bit? I'm like, sure, why not? And they took me to a class, and then, it's just like, all right, cool. You're our turret gunner, but you're also our drone pilot. So make sure that that's ready to go whenever we go out and we need it, which we never really used it. In training we used it, but we never used it really in combat or in any of the other scenarios. So it was kind of I have the certificate, and that was it.
I suppose you understand why it happens like this in Ukraine. This is because the initiative to use civil drones at the war was born at the grassroots level. People were trying to find a solution because there were no other options available. We just needed to find a way how to spot where the enemy was to decide what to do. Thanks to the volunteers who buy these civil drones and send them to the military guys, there are a lot of them at the front line. At the same time, there are people who are constantly complaining and asking why this has to be done by volunteers. Like in the USA, the state provides to the army with everything they need. In the USA, they have everything. There you don't have to buy anything at all by yourself. Just to explain, here in Ukraine, the state provides us with the uniform, and if someone wants to buy something extra or something better, you can do it. I don't know why, but a lot of people think that in the USA it is like the basement of James Bond, one box of this, one box of that, or one more blaster gun. And I'm sure that you had good equipment when you were in Iraq, but did you have to buy something additionally when you were there?
So yeah, I did buy my own stuff here. And in the US, I did some of the same. So within the US, I'll say within the US first, yeah, we are provided with the majority of the primary kit and everything that we'll need, right? We don't have to worry about vehicles because we have a motor pool that's got Humvees and MREs and everything inside of it. Obviously, we don't have to worry about weapons because we have an armory. Basic kit and uniform, those are given to you as well. But if you want something special or you want something additional, yeah, I still had to buy my own uniforms. The U.S. the Marines gave me an annual clothing allowance to replace uniforms. So if they were torn or faded or too small, too big, I could use that money that they gave me to buy the uniforms I need. Now, technically, they are still paying for it. They're just giving me the option to choose to use it or not. And if you're really good, then you don't need to use it all, and it's a nice little bonus. But definitely still had to buy some smaller items, but not a lot. Here in Ukraine, I did come over with some of my own stuff. I had a backpack and a sea bag, and that was all I had. Now I have way more stuff than I know what to do with. But I would say about 60% of that is stuff that either donors had given to me, so like you said, volunteers had gotten for me, or things that I have bought myself out of my own pocket. And that's for various reasons. Some I understand, and others that are above my pay grade that I don't understand. So, I can't see what's on the other side of that wall, so I can guess, I can speculate, but that's stuff that I don't generally worry about too much, because my experience, they're going to, the higher ups, the government, whoever, they're going to do what they're going to do. I can only control what I can control, and that's to make the best of the situation and plan it out. And half the time, the stuff that I buy is better than the stuff that they would give me anyway.
I suppose you have noticed that with the beginning of the war, there was a fast development of mil-tech manufacturers, military clothes, firearms, accessories. I think that you have heard about M-Tech, Ballistica, Ukr Armor, Velmet, etc. And I hear that a lot of foreigners think of these things as of very high quality, and at the same time the prices are quite small. Perhaps you could confirm or deny this information. I mean that there are a lot of guys who are buying military clothes and plate carriers here in Ukraine, because the prices are considerably cheaper and they will still have a good quality. Like, please buy a tech plate carrier because it has better price to quality ratio.
Yes. Yeah. So in most cases, yes, it is the Ukrainian domestically created stuff. It has improved. I remember when it first started going on more, it wasn't all that great. But over time now, it's pretty much on par, if not in some cases superior to some of the other products that are out there. And yeah, the price, you can't beat the price. Most of that's because it's domestically created. We don't have to pay tariffs or import taxes or whatever the hell. Yeah, I actually do advise some of our newer recruits that are coming in, or guys who are interested in coming over and joining, the various Legion units, that either A, they buy what they need back home, because buying U.S. stuff in the U.S. is cheaper than buying it here in Ukraine. But if they are missing something, you can buy it. You can buy most of what you need here in Ukraine. It's not all that expensive if you're trying to get, Ukrainian domestic products. And even some of the stuff that we can't bring over the border because of international laws and everything, like rifle scopes, magazines, things for weapons, period. It's like you can buy those here in Ukraine. And they're either the same price or near the same price as if you were to buy it over in like the US or in Britain or wherever. So yeah, it's good stuff. I have a lot of items from like MTAC myself. So one of my favorite military winter jackets is from MTAC.
And I also wanted to ask you, we talked briefly about the language barrier, I remember my conversation with the tank crews that went to the training abroad. When I asked them if they learned a bit of German or English during their trainings, they answered, frankly, no, but the instructors learned Ukrainian a bit instead while we were there at the training. So those guys were a bit lazy to learn the language. What about you? Did you learn any Ukrainian words or phrases? Are you trying to improve your Ukrainian language?
Shoot. I've learned some Ukrainian, not as much as I would like to have learned. Language is a difficult thing for me to learn overall, but I've learned enough that I can generally communicate. Leva prava. I can count. I can один, два, три, четыре, пять, шесть. I can go up to there. I know my hundreds, сто, my thousands, тысяч. I can order a beer. Można piwo, будь ласка, which is important for my off hours. So I've learned some things, but again, not as much as I'd like. It's a work in progress for me.
Some people say the war is not going to end soon, so you have enough time to practice. You mentioned earlier that you have been interacting with Azov, hunting together for the tanks. Maybe you can name some other units, brigades, or some other people from Ukrainian army who impressed you positively or negatively. Maybe some other cases of interactions.
So I haven't had any spectacularly negative interactions with any one unit per se. Well, that's a lie. I did have a negative interaction with a unit before. I won't name that unit because I don't think it does anybody any good to drag anyone's name through the dirt. But I will say that there have been a lot of different units. Like I said, there was the 95th. I believe it is the 44th and 45th battalions, or brigades, actually. There are, I'm terrible with names and units that aren't I'm not one-on-one talking with like this. We've served with Kraken, obviously, one of our sister units. And those guys, they know how to. They have the same, I would say, zeal that Azov showed me, where they're just like, "Yep, nope, we're gonna go over that hill. You want to come with us?" And like, okay. So they got some really, really stiff spines in that unit, and they got a lot of love in Kharkiv as well. You just see murals and signs all over the place for it's like Kraken. Okay, this is Kraken's town. So they are, those guys. I think I had a really good positive relationship for the most part. They actually medevaced me out when I was injured. So big props to them. They pulled a lot of our other injured brothers out of some hairy situations in a couple different AOs. So mad respect for those guys. And then obviously the various other numbered brigades that are, again, just so many numbered brigades that I can't keep them all together. But if any of them are watching this and they see me, one of the benefits of being me is there's not a lot. There aren't many. So thank you, gentlemen, for all the support and some of the good times that we've had too. but yeah, I generally have a good experience every with every Ukrainian unit that we end up serving with or assisting. And they're genuinely, by and large, they're genuinely very happy to see us as well. So, it goes both ways.
І я б хотів запитати про
The next question will be about the enemies, about the Russians. Maybe you also heard such statements that Russians make, like all Ukrainian forces are already killed, we hear only English and Polish language on the front line, there are only mercenaries, there are only NATO forces and mercenaries there. Were there situations when the Russians could really hear you giving commands in English?
Yes. So yes, I have heard about the Russian propaganda that, NATO is the only one here and I'm actually a NATO mercenary. No. I am contracted under the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. I am, for all intents and purposes, I am a Ukrainian soldier, and proud to be one. So they can shove that propaganda up their, what's. But as far as freaking out some Russians or their conscripts, yes, had plenty of time. My very first mission, the first thing we did was we had, they weren't Russian themselves. They were, I always get this one wrong. The rebels, the Donetsk People Republic rebels, right? It was a bunch of them, and they were holed up in a building, and suddenly all they hear are a bunch of guys speaking English, speaking French, Estonian, and they're just, I can only imagine the looks on their faces inside going, what's going on outside? Who did we just get captured by? And definitely, same thing in Bakhmut. I've yelled at a couple of guys across the way before. It's just like, come on out, you stupid fuckers! And the hell is that, an American? So I've had the opportunity to hopefully freak out some guys. I never got to see their faces in reaction to that, obviously. But who knows? Maybe down the line, I'll come around the corner spouting some American profanities in English and see the confused and shocked face of a Russian or North Korean, who knows?
You haven't seen any North Korean guys here yet, have you?
No. The Koreans when the Koreans were first reported as being on the ground, I was in the hospital. So I've not had an opportunity to see them. From what I'm told, from what I hear, they're only in Kherson right now. But that is obviously you and I know the reality is they're probably already in Ukraine. And if they're not, they will be very, very soon. So the opportunity will be there.
Don't you think, is it already the Third World War? Because there are a lot of people from different countries are already here at the front line.
So by definition, because I had this conversation with some friends, by definition, yes, we are technically already in a Third World War. Simply because we have three distinct nations fighting on the ground with their governments backing them. And they come from, obviously, different segments of the planet. If you look at it in the logistical sense, we were in the Third World War the second Russia decided to come over that border, because immediately NATO and all of its allies decided to throw their backing and we're shoving weapons and equipment in here, then yes, we are, by that standard, 100%, we're in a Third World War. But if you're talking about scale, no, not quite. We would need I think we would need at least one of the NATO nations or one other government nation or state to join on our side. So there's 2 and 2 going. You know, at the bare minimum, I would say that. And when that happens, I think Putin's going to lose his shit and he's going to start pushing buttons he shouldn't be pushing, which is just going to draw everything in. But historically speaking, I would say that the writing is definitely on the wall. I mean, we saw this happen, this slow buildup to the full World War status. We saw it in World War I, and we saw it in World War II. If one aggressor nation starts pushing on another nation, one other nation decides to get involved at one point or another, and then slowly more guys come in, and it's, you know, full scale. So I think that if the nations in the world do not wake up, do not recognize this historical constant so far, we are just going to repeat what happened in World War I and what happened in World War II, and we're going to make a conflict that could have only lasted a year or two into a 10 to 15-year conflict, just like it did in the past. So, yeah, I think I view it definitely that we are in the beginnings of World War III.
You have just mentioned that the war started when Russia had crossed the border. You joined the Ukrainian army in 2022 when you saw Zelensky asking the foreigners to join our army. You decided to join. I think that after joining Ukrainian army, you were told that the war actually started in 2014 because the Russians crossed the border in 2014. At the beginning, they were claiming that it was not them and that it was just miners who bought somehow the tanks in a military shop and things like this. I wanted to ask you about this period from 2014 till 2022. At that time, you were living in the USA. Did you hear anything about Ukraine at that time and about some kind of anti-terrorist operation that was going on here? Was this topic present in the field of military community and civilians?
So yeah, no, I do remember when Russia came over and was invading through the Donbas, and then, you know, the annexation of Crimea. I do remember those, and I remember thinking at the time, why are we not doing more to delegitimize what Russia is doing and push them out? Because this is just going to spark a bigger conflict. You know, hindsight being what it is, haha, told you so. So yeah, I was aware that this conflict started well back in 2014. The reports of they're not Russians, they're just guys who are wearing, you know, generic Russian uniforms with no name tags or flag. Yeah, okay. I don't think anyone with more than 2 brain cells to rub together believe that BS. But yeah, no, that was definitely, I knew about it. I watched it. I did not agree with it. I did not like it. But at the time, you know, there wasn't anything that I thought I could do at that time. If I had known about the future, maybe I could probably say that I would have come over here earlier, maybe, if we were playing that what if game, and all that. So, but yeah, I knew about it. My friends and I, my fellow veterans, we all knew about it, and we all had a very similar mindset of this is going to start some real bad shit down the road if we don't do something as a collective, like international group to tell Russia, stop, give back Ukraine, you know, give Crimea back to Ukraine, get your guys that aren't there out of the Donbas and stay out of it, which obviously they didn't.
Now the war has evolved really very much. You recalled the Battle of Bakhmut that you took part in. You recalled the storm of Russians that were in that building, who looked like were not really well trained at that moment. But due to the evolution, Russians also getting more and more professional, well-trained units with good equipment, good weapons, high level of competence. There were such guys also among PMC Wagner in Bakhmut. What can you tell about the Russian elite forces? Did you encounter them, those really pros?
I can say that the one encounter that I had against Wagner was a kind of a non-encounter. We were manning a defensive position in Bakhmut. We actually took up position about 200 or 300 meters behind the actual zero line. We had friendly Ukrainian forces in front. We were setting up a secondary line. About an hour into us setting that up, the primary line collapsed. We don't know what happened to them. We don't know if they were all wiped out, if they ran away, if they were over. We just don't know. All we know is headquarters came over the radio and said, "You're the zero line now. The 4 positions in front of you are gone." Okay. Then we got drone confirmation that there were Wagner forces heading towards us. And in particular, there were about 2 or 3 guys going into this one building that we had interlocking fields of fire on. So every one of us were just like, that building over there? Right. And so I'm behind my machine gun. Everybody else has got their weapons trained on this one building. And we're looking, and one of them popped their heads out. Only one of my riflemen fired on him. And the fact that not every other guy decided to pull their triggers, I want to believe if they were actually proper Wagner, not their meat shields that they were using, the prisoners, that they knew we were there, but because only one rifleman fired on them and not an entire team, they either knew one of 2 things, I think. One, we're dealing with a well-disciplined, well-trained group of guys, which means that this is not a spot we can try and push through because they're just going to get wiped out. Or 2, they didn't know how many guys were actually there. They knew that there were a number, but because only one guy opened up, they didn't know if it was 5 guys or 30 guys. And again, they didn't want to push through. Because we do know that Wagner, well, Russians in general, they'll send out a small force to locate all the firing positions of a suspected area. And the fact that they couldn't get that from us tells me that they didn't want to play with us, which I was disappointed. I was disappointed that Wagner decided to be a bunch of pussies. But at the same time, like realistically speaking, it does speak to a level of intelligence on their side. I would be very ignorant and remiss to not recognize that as much as we may hate them, not every one of them is an idiot. They recognized that we were there as a well-trained force, and they didn't want to risk that. They wanted to find a weaker, lesser trained spot to try and push through. So although I didn't get to fight them in that spot, which again I'm disappointed on, it did, we're force multiplying, right? We did our job there. They showed up, they poked, they felt steel instead of, water or wet paper, and they decided to go somewhere else. We held that particular line, and who knows how many lives that, we saved just by being there, right? Because we did have several Ukrainian forces behind us. We also had a 50 that was set up there. One of the guys from the
National Guard?
No, It was this? Oh gosh, I keep wanting to think it's the 95th that was up there, or 96. Yeah, 95th and the 96th, one of those two.
95th are paratroopers.
Десантні війська.
Yeah, they had a 50. They had a 50 that was set up in a really advantageous spot right behind us. So, and they peppered a 60 millimeter position out there. So, but yeah, I mean, just again, our presence there and the fact that we just kind of went high, and Wagner said nope, and went away to somewhere else. You know, proves that we're doing something here, even if we're not pulling triggers. The fact that we are there and they don't want to mess with us, you know, that helps to hold that line, save some lives, buy some time if we need to for either a buildup for counteroffensive or, you know, further fortification of a defensive line. So just our presence seems to have an effect, and the Russian special forces or more elite troops, they recognize that, and yeah.
You said that you aimed your machine gun and prepared to shoot. So you are a machine gunner. What machine gun do you use? Is it a mini-me?
Yeah, it is actually a mini-me variant. It's a Mark 48 Mod 1. It's a 7.62 chambered mini-me. But I don't actually use that anymore. That's what I was using then. Now my command decided to put me in a place of responsibility now, so I'm a team leader. So I actually just have my Daniel Defense M4, and I lead troops into contact and into their various fighting positions and everything. So that's where they put me. I wish I was still behind my machine gun sometimes, though. But yeah, I do use that. I've had a 240 Bravo since I've been here. And I've also had, I actually started with the PKM, which was my first time ever using a PKM. I loved my PKM. But yeah.
Подобався ПКМ.
So you do like it?
Супер, клас.
Yeah.
Серйозно?
Is it very much different?
It is and it isn't. The fundamentals of using a machine gun are the same. The PKM is got a really good rate of fire. It's really accurate up to, you know, around, I was able to plug targets, like window-sized targets, at about 700, 750 meters. And the only real complaint that I have about the PKM is the fact that it doesn't have a disintegrating belt. I do not like, I don't like it feeding in, and then I have links hanging down the side that I have to worry about either tripping on or getting snagged on something as I try and move positions. It's my only complaint about the weapon. Otherwise, it's a good weapon. It's a good, solid, consistent weapon.
So 700 meters. This is even beyond the marksman distance. It's closer to the sniper distance.
Вау. Вау.
Cool.
So that's, I mean, those are for area targets. Again, I'm plugging a size about size of these windows here at about 700 meters or so. But yeah, I mean, you can be that accurate. A lot of people, not just Ukrainians, but a lot of guys from the other nations that I serve with, you know, they're all like, oh yeah, shoot at 100 meters, 100 meters, 100 meters. And I'm sitting there going, this is your marksmanship standard? Like, basic Marine Corps marksmanship is 500 yards, which is about 440 something meters, 450 meters, somewhere around there. That is the basic marksmanship qualification range. We go from 100, 200, 300, and then 500 yards is what we shoot at. And you have to get a particular score in order to pass. If you do not, then you go through remedial. Your friends in the unit start laughing at you because you suck. but that's like the basic. And I see so many, I always scratch my head. I'm like, why is 100 meters impressive? Like, that's point to point, you know. To me, it's everybody should be able to hit a target at least 300 meters away, I would say. At least 300 meters away.
І крайня.
And the last question I want to ask you.
Я не звернув
I can't help but notice the logo on your sweatshirt.
Ти кажеш,
You
що
said that this is the logo of your team, and these are your buddies.
зображені на світлині. І
So yeah, my teammates, or my former teammates, they're actually on a different team now, or I'm on a different team than them. But this is their silhouette that they had, and one of our teammates had commissioned the sweatshirt
я
at the time.
у зв'язку
In this context, I'd like to ask you about military culture. The Ukrainian military culture that you can see here in Ukraine, it's became a real drive for us. People are creating units, and these are not just units with documented numbers. People select specific logos and style. Some people even record some kind of rap songs about their units. All this create the self-identification.
це вже не просто
Not just an army. Some people select anime, the others use Scandinavian myths.
наскільки от
Do you think that this is important to create such added value by the means of digital production tools
за рахунок такого
and to brand your unit?
брендинг свого підрозділу?
Yeah, no, it's always important, I think. And I mean, we see it a lot more here in this war, but every military unit does it, right? They all have their own particular emblem or coat of arms that they have. They have their own mottos and sayings. I mean, my old unit within the Marine Corps, we had, we made our own shirts with the unit logo on it and something on the back that was really cool or something, right? But here it's far more individualistic, right? We have whole brigades that are doing it, and then we have, you know, small 5 to 15 man teams that are doing it. And I think it helps to build that brotherhood, that sense of belonging for each individual that joins, right? So especially within, I would say, the Legion units, or any unit that incorporates anybody from, that is outside of the Ukrainian nationality, it further solidifies that sense of brotherhood with each other, because it's no longer, oh, I'm in the 120th, you know, brigade. No, I'm part of, you know, Foxhound or freaking Vanguard, or, you know, I'm part of that unit right now, right? And it's something that they can take with them from the rear to the battlefield, and then, you know, inevitably back home. You know, they can talk to their friends, their family, their grandkids later down the way, right? And say, hey, I was a part of this unit, and there they are. You know, stamped in history as being a part of a particular engagement or serving a key role here or there. So yeah, it's definitely it's a part of the identity of each individual, each unit, and just this war in general.
Do you feel the historic importance of this war and your participation in this war? That, for example, somewhere in Wikipedia there is the article on Battle of Bakhmut, and you can, I've been there.
Definitely feel that. You know, circumstances that they are, it is a point of pride, I think, for myself and for anybody who has served in any of these various battles. You know, there's a part of me that wished I was a part of the Kharkiv offensive, but I knew that the particular role and job I was doing in the area that I was in at the time was also important in its own way. It did not pan out or evolve into the big, historical stamp or media block that the Kharkiv offensive was, but it was important all the same, right? If we weren't there, maybe those forces would have said, all right, cool, we can cut down to half, send them up to Kharkiv because our guys are getting their shit pushed in. We need to stop that. Every particular segment within this war is a historical stamp. It's just some are going to be bigger than others, obviously. But I think that down the road, after this conflict is resolved, we're going to see in various documentaries, various historical papers and books that there is a represented spot for everybody who has served here. I would say that, especially with all the GoPro footage and drone footage that we have now, you're going to see, yep, I was there. Yep, I was there too. Oh yeah, I remember that. That was back in 2022. So yeah, I feel it, and I would think that you feel it as well, given where you have served, and anybody else that's watching, they can definitely feel a sense of pride and go, yeah, I was there.
I do want to thank you for the choice that you have made, for being the part of these historical events. Thank you for your service, and thank you for this interview.
Thank you.
Будь ласка.
It was the first interview in the history of Army TV with such style, with this garniture. Oh, exciting. Oh, man. One moment. I have a little present for you. It's the logo of Minister of Defense. You know it, but this Army TV.
Oh, cool.
It's us. It's this guy and this guy.
Well, thank you. Дуже дякую. All right. Got another one from my collection.
Yeah, it's exclusive.
Дуже дякую.